The gig economy is more than a buzzword. It's a seismic shift in how we work and live. Imagine a marketplace teeming with freelancers, independent contractors, and part-time workers. These modern-day artisans craft their destinies one gig at a time, connected by digital platforms that serve as both stage and marketplace. What fuels this revolution? A trifecta: cutting-edge technology, economic fluctuations, and a societal yearning for flexibility over the traditional 9-to-5 grind. These forces have coalesced to redefine employment, making room for a more fluid, project-based labor market. As of 2021, nearly one-third of America's workforce has stepped into this arena, a trend that gained momentum during the pandemic. But it's not without its pitfalls. The freedom comes at the cost of job security and benefits, raising questions about its sustainability. So is the gig economy the future, or a stopgap response to the current challenges? As we explore this landscape, we'll uncover the nuances that make it both an opportunity and a gamble. And I'm wondering if Lindsey can kick us off, because you've done extensive research on gig workers. Can you kind of set the stage? What is gig work, and how does the experience of working in the gig economy different from the experience of working in a more traditional employment setting?
Okay, so I think Sergio and I can tag team this question. So, gig work, what I tend to think of it is you're using a platform, you're using your phone to sort of be the intermediation between the worker and the employee. But folks can also talk, you're going to get these old academic hats on. We're like, well, there's always been gig work. Like musicians play gigs, babysitters play gigs. So you could think of them as sort of like the OG, the original gig workers. But when we're thinking about today, sort of like the modern instantiation, are these companies that are facilitating having a service being done through this sort of technology. And it's about 1% of the US workforce that's working for these apps, either part or full time. So it's a pretty substantial number of people. And about half of that 1% are for the big ride hailing companies. So for Uber or Lyft. And I mean, it just raises all sorts of questions about what happens when you have an algorithm as your manager as opposed to a human. Are these individuals independent contractors, or are they employees? If you've been following what's been happening in California, there's a lot of conversation around that. Should you have customers rating their behaviors or not? Should they be paid minimum wage? That comes into a big question of whether or not employee classification is. So those are some of the big questions we're thinking about when we're thinking about gig economy. So Sergio, what did I miss?
Yeah, you didn't miss much, but you're right about the OGs of gig work. I mean, there is close to, I think, last time I checked, close to 50 million small business owners who are also independent contractors, the true independent contractors, not the so-called independent contractors that the gig apps want us to believe. There are 50 million of these people. They just run their small businesses. They're true freelancers. And, the conversation should be about those people, actually. But then, sensationalism is obviously what it is these days in the media. And then, obviously Uber, who they are, DoorDash, I mean, there is an app for everything these days. And at the opening segment, actually, when you were running the intro, which was great, Andy, whoever did the editing on that, I want his name. There was a line that caught my ear, which was exchange of your time for money. And that's what gig work is these days. Literally, that has what's become. From the days I started, which was extremely lucrative. I mean, 7-8 years ago, I would just turn my app on and probably make $50, $60 an hour, which is what a master plumber would make. And with the freedom and the flexibility that it offers. And I think a lot of people these days are getting into gig work because of the macro economy more than anything else, because of inflation. And their regular W-2s are not enough to pay the bills. And what easier way? I mean, barriers to entry is super easy. You just upload your documents and you're driving or you're delivering or whatever you're doing, and make a few $100 a week that way. And that's what gig work has become.
Sergio, I've heard you say that an independent contractor, like your time is for sale to the highest bidder.
You heard that, huh?
Can you talk a little bit about that mentality and then how the gig economy has evolved since you started?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I first started, which was early 2016, I started with Uber, driving for Uber. They were the only app. I mean, rideshare was the only game in town, right? And then I signed up for Lyft, which was the competitor for Uber. All these apps that came actually are fairly new, just because, I mean, we all know about the pandemic, right? When the pandemic hit, we were all locked up in our homes. And sure enough, DoorDash took off, Uber Eats took off, Grubhub took off, Instacart, all these apps. I mean, literally today, Andy, there's an app for everything. I mean, you can literally like push a button, a dog walker will show up to your house. It's called Wags. So to me, the proliferation of the gig apps is just, look, it's a service that we're providing as gig workers. Okay. And now today, and I'm sure you heard my quote because I say it on Show Me the Money all the time, which is my time is for sale as a true independent contractor. We can discuss this with Lindsey later. My time is for sale to the highest bidder. I have 8 apps on my phone. I turn them all on at the same time. And my first 20 minutes may be for sale to Uber. The next 10 should be Lyft. Next 20 could be DoorDash. But I want to maximize my earnings. And if you're stuck on a single app like I used to do in 2016, you're dead. You're just not going to make any money.
Elaine, I want to ask you, because in your book, The $1 Million One-Person Business, you talk about 6 types of high-revenue one-person businesses. Can you talk a little bit about them and how the gig economy enables these businesses?
Sure. Well, often there are a lot of gig workers that provide services to the businesses. That's how the businesses grow. Usually when a business gets to 7-figure revenue, with one owner and nobody on payroll, there's a team of contractors. And a lot of times those contractors are very happy to have the work. For instance, for 17 years, I've been part of the gig economy. I guess I'm not an Uber driver, but I'm a freelance writer. I write for multiple clients. I don't want to be an employee. I have not wanted to for a long time. I think we have a lot of freedom in terms of what type of work we go after. So sometimes people will start out in services like Uber or any of the other ones, and they learn the ropes of business, and they learn a very important lesson, which is profitability. You'll quickly learn if you're driving an Uber car, if the price goes up of gasoline, then your business is less profitable. I did a story for CNBC at one point, looking at how many people went on to start other businesses. Generally, what I found is you're not going to find too many people on the apps like Uber, Lyft, et cetera, that are making $1 million in revenue, if any. You will find some on platforms like Upwork, where they might own a niche. There's a case study in my recent book of someone who does business plans, and he wound up being the most in-demand business plan writer on Upwork. And he's got $1 million business where he built a team of contractors to support him with things like designing the look and feel of the business plans and other things like that. As far as the niches, e-commerce was a big one. And we see a lot of people doing interesting things with that, where they might be on, say, Amazon. Maybe they're also selling some stuff through Facebook Marketplace or other marketplaces and their own website. So that's how they're able to scale their revenue. And that's kind of a unique niche in that it doesn't really take that many people. Usually what it requires is paid advertising. So if someone finds a way to drive traffic to their e-commerce products, they can use the advertising to amplify what's working and bring in more customers, maybe in different markets around the world or different markets in the US. So that's how they're scaling. There's a few other ones that are tied to the gig economy. Real estate rental and leasing is a very big one. And that's, of course, Airbnb and all the similar types of companies. That's a very good area for people that want something they can do in addition to a traditional job. You can always do that on the side. There are people that learn the ropes that way and they get good at it, and then they build up a portfolio of rentals. Or some people are actually getting to 1 million by managing other people's rentals in a certain way that people like, with the decor and keeping them clean and that sort of thing. The other one's professional services is actually the biggest one. You had talked about trading time for dollars, and people always think service businesses are a bad way to get to 1 million, but actually there's about $43,000 million non-employer businesses, meaning businesses that don't run payroll, mostly solopreneurs, sometimes partnerships or startups. And of them, about 10,000 are professional services. So these would be high-end professionals of various sorts. Personal services is a big one too. People like nutritionists, fitness coaches. They're usually people that have productized some type of knowledge that they've gathered. So they might have a culinary academy or license out their fitness training methodology, but they're basically taking their knowledge and somehow selling it to other people. I'm missing one there. Informational marketing and content creation is another one. There's so many influencers, people like that. They're really doing incredible and interesting things. They could be doing mastermind classes. They could be doing webinars, things where they're selling valuable knowledge to other people. These fields are competitive. So these are the Olympic athletes of the gig world. These, out of, I think it's about 32 million small businesses in the US, this is going to be less than 1%. But why I'm interested in them is, think about the 4-minute mile, right? People thought that couldn't be done. Now there's a lot of people who have run a 4-minute mile. Once you know it can be done, then people start reverse engineering and thinking, well, maybe I don't need to get to 1 million in revenue. Maybe I need 60,000 because I live in a rural area where the cost of living is low, but right now I'm making 30,000. So how do I take what these people have learned, apply it to my business, and have a better lifestyle? The other issue to think about is profitability, which you need to think about whether you're an Uber driver or you're running an e-commerce business. You could spend more on advertising in e-commerce than you're bringing in, and then you'll be unprofitable. So it's a very rich and interesting area because the number has kept on growing since I started following it in 2012. And I think this community shares a lot of information freely. So as more people try it, others learn from it. The other reason I'm very interested in it is because, just being a journalist, access to capital has been a perennial problem. Less than 3% of the venture capital in the country goes to women, and I think it's like 1% goes to people of color. And that number has never really budged. There's been zero progress the whole time I've been a reporter. And I think there are just systemic issues that make the pace so glacial that most people can't wait. You'd have to wait 2 lifetimes to see any sort of improvement. So this is a door into entrepreneurship that does not require a lot of startup capital. It allows people to generate revenue that they can reinvest in a business and bootstrap. So it's a whole new pathway to entrepreneurship. And I think that's why you see women and people of color are some of the fastest growing groups of entrepreneurs in the gig economy. So I think this is going to be a fascinating area of study once these businesses grow. And once some of them get sold and people start building capital, we're going to see a whole universe of interesting findings coming out of this. So that was kind of a long, rambling comment, but basically, yeah, a lot to talk about.
Well, clearly we're seeing that the gig economy is a very big term. It encompasses so many different types of jobs. Steve, can you talk about your experience? Because you've had a foot firmly in the gig economy, but contrary to the Ubers and the Lyfts, I think you haven't been dependent upon apps.
No, definitely not apps. I was a mobile DJ for 3 decades while I was still working a day job. The corporate job started in about the year 2000. And then this thing that just started to explode happened in 2016. So I had a lot of self-employed gig type, jobs, I guess you call them, during the, 80s, 90s, even into the 2000s before this became what I now call a career. The instability of it is what's scary. You can gain a client, you can lose 3. It's really variable. And each month is not a salary type of position like I'm used to in the old days, plus the whole tax situation, which I think we're going to get into a little bit later. But it's a whole new world this way, even though it's been around for 3 decades. Things keep reinventing itself. The apps have definitely, I've seen it. I haven't played with the apps as far as doing gigs, but I use them. I used Uber 3 times last week and spent a lot of money with Uber. So it was a great convenience that I absolutely love. And I'm grateful for each and every person that served me in that way. I think we all need to be aware of that as well.